Which is the better Mac for music production? The base model M1 Mac Mini or the i9 Intel MacBook Pro? Let's check it out. Hey there and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm comparing the $900 base model Mac Mini M1 with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage versus the $3,600 MacBook Pro. And to test these two computers, I've chosen the most demanding software synth included in Studio One 5, which is the Mai Thai synthesizer. Now Mai Thai is a really diverse synth, and it has lead sounds, it's got nice pads, got synth basses, it's all over the place. It's a really good and cool sounding synth, but it's really taxing on your computer. It uses a lot of CPU and it uses a lot of RAM. It's one of the things that can really make your session kneel and come to a halt. So I'm gonna try out how many simultaneous tracks and instances of Mai Thai I can play back on both these computers. I'll be starting with the lowest hardware buffer I can achieve on each machine, which is around 16 samples, and I'll set the dropout protection mode in Studio One to minimum. That leaves the least amount of headroom for the computer to process the audio, but it gives you the lowest latency, which is what you want when you're recording. If you'd been mixing, then you could turn all those things up a lot and get more headroom and increase latency. But when recording, you need latency to be at a minimum. So that's why I'm starting there. So let's jump into the first computer and see how it fares. Here are my 2 tracks of Mai Thai. And now we're just gonna play back the project with 2 tracks and just look at the CPU usage. And you can see that the CPU usage was pretty steady. So I'm going to just double the tracks from 2 to 4. And again to 8. So now there's 8 instances of Mai Thai. The CPU usage has increased, but it's still holding pretty steady. So, not a challenge at all for the Mac Mini. I'm going to double the tracks again to 16 counts of Mai Thai. So it's still steady as a rock, and I'm doubling it again to 32 tracks, 32 instances of Mai Thai. And so far we've seen that the CPU usage increases, but it's rock steady at whatever level it hits when you hit playback. This is 32. Now there is some slight clipping noises, but that's more due to the audio becoming increasingly loud, I think, because the CPU isn't showing any signs of clipping yet. But just to see if that's the issue, I'm changing the dropout protection to medium. I guess that was the culprit. The results this far are pretty impressive to me. I'm still at medium dropout protection, which means that the latency is just barely noticeable. So let's try 64 tracks. Okay. Okay, seems like we finally found the speed limit or the brick wall where it starts struggling. Let's try maximum dropout protection. No, still too much. But we're still at the smallest hardware buffer available, 16 samples, which is insane. Let's go to 128, which is as high as you can go and still have a small enough latency that it works for recording. No. So 64 tracks, that turns out to be too much. It's kind of weird because it was running pretty well at 32 tracks with everything set to low latency. I'm just gonna go to max latency now, see if it makes any difference. No. Okay, so we've concluded that 64 tracks of Mai Thai is too much for the Mac Mini M1. I'm just gonna remove a few. Okay, I'll remove a couple more and go down to 44 tracks. And there you go. So now I want to adjust the buffer back to 128. It's looking pretty steady. Let's try going back to medium dropout protection. You got some clipping, but still pretty steady. Okay, so we can conclude that around 40 to 44 tracks with a low enough sample rate and dropout protection that you can actually record with the base M1 with just 8 gigs of RAM. Okay, cool. Let's get into the MacBook Pro. Now I'm on the MacBook Pro, and just to show you the specs, this is the latest i9 version Apple has released. It was released in 2019, minus the 2020 model. You can see 2.3 gigahertz, 8-core i9, 16 gigs of RAM, dedicated graphics, and integrated graphics as well. So it has twice the RAM of the Mac Mini. And I've loaded up the same project, starting off with dropout protection set to minimum, Hardware sample size set to 16, which is the lowest. Let's just play back and see. It's running really steady at 15% CPU usage. I'm just gonna multiply the tracks, get up to 8, which is the first milestone. Let's see, 8 tracks, 8 instances of Mai Thai. Yeah, that's good. So we'll double it to 16. Yeah, it's mostly holding steady. There was one small spike, but nothing more happened, so I'll allow it. And then let's go for 32. Now, I've had this computer since late 2020. It's been my main computer for both audio work, recording, mixing albums, client work, and also video editing. And the dedicated graphics was one of the reasons I bought it. So I've been pretty satisfied with the computer so far, but I'm really curious to see, strictly for audio work, how it holds its own against the M1 processor. So 32 tracks, let's go. Okay, that's kind of a bummer. It seems like it's having some CPU spikes already at 32 tracks. I'm just going to increase the dropout protection, because that's what these are, dropouts. Going to increase it to medium. And that introduces a bit of latency, but not enough to make it unusable. So medium dropout protection is kind of the recommended setting from PreSonus. It should keep dropouts at a minimum while still giving you low enough latency that you can record with it. So let's see if it does changes anything. Still getting those dropouts. Okay, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to change to 128 samples. Like I said, when I was recording on the Mac Mini, 128 is the highest I'll go when recording. It gives the computer a lot more headroom to process things, but it still keeps the latency short enough that it's hardly noticeable when recording. But anything above 128, then it becomes kind of hard to play in time. So 128 at medium dropout protection. Okay, well, that's better, less dropouts. But it's kind of weird because the Mac Mini can go up to 80% and be rock solid at 80%, while the MacBook Pro has a lower baseline, but then it has dropouts, pushing it up to above 100%. Well, the Mac Mini went all the way up to 44 tracks, and that's the highest track count I got without any issues. So let's see if I can go up to 44 here as well. So now I'm at 44 audio tracks, and on the Mac Mini I could run this at medium and 128. So let's see if the MacBook Pro can do it as well. So you can see I'm getting some dropouts. It's not affecting the playback. But you can hear them, and it would probably take you out of the right state of mind when recording. So it's still a nuisance. I tried the Mac Mini all the way up to 64. So let's see if the MacBook Pro wants to play back 64 tracks. But then I put the Mini at everything to max. So let's do that on the MacBook Pro as well. So now I'm at the highest hardware buffer settings, 4000, and the dropout protection is at max. So let's see if I can play back 64 tracks of Mai Thai, which in of it itself is kind of insane, but why not? And that's no. That's a no. Okay, let's go back down to, let's try 50. 49. No, that's a no-go as well. So it seems, I'm sad to say, in regards to how much money I've spent, I'm sad to say that it seems like the Mac Mini is more stable, running steadier, even though its CPU usage is higher, while the MacBook Pro has a lower CPU usage, but it's struggling with audio dropouts and it's just stopping playback when it gets to text. Okay, so the Mac Mini M1 was able to run more instances of the Mai Thai software synth without getting audio dropouts and issues than the i9 MacBook Pro, which was kind of surprising considering the MacBook Pro has twice the amount of RAM. But still, the i9 was able to hold its own even though it's older Intel tech versus the latest Apple silicone. And both of these machines was able to run far more instances of Mai Thai or any software synth that I would usually need in a production. Playing back 40 tracks of synths at separate instances instead of layering the same synth several times or using some track bouncing thing tech or something like that. It's pretty absurd to me, and most of the tracks I use as a guitar player are audio tracks. But still, I knew that this would be more taxing than just using some plugins on audio tracks. That's why I went for the software synth test today. If you want the latest and greatest tech without spending too much money, you'll get an incredible studio workhorse with the base M1 Mac Mini. I would, however, get a bigger SSD, and I would increase to 16 gigs of RAM. On the other hand, if you're willing to settle for older tech, then you could probably get a really good deal on an i9 based Mac, and that usually comes with more RAM and more storage since they're older models. So if you want the latest and greatest, get the Mac Mini, but not necessarily the base model. And if you want more bang for your buck, then perhaps an i9 might still be a good purchase. Okay, that's my test. I hope you'll find this useful when you're deciding on your next Mac purchase. If this video was helpful for you, or you like this, I'd appreciate if you press the like button or comment, and I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel. I'm slowly working towards 500 subscribers, and then perhaps 1,000 and more. So click subscribe, like, share if you want, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.